Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulullah. My name is Danish, Siddiqui. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. We wanted to talk to you real quick about an organization we started about a year ago. And it serves the entire state of Tennessee. I know that seems a little bit odd since we're at Texas Dawah Convention. But inshallah, after we finish, you'll understand why we came to talk to you about it. And don't worry, it's not a fundraising pitch. So can we roll that video? Just have a quick video, and then I will have a few words, inshallah.
A kafir can be terrorized. Quran 8:12. Then your Lord spoke to his angels and said, I will be with you. Give strength to the believers. I will send terror into the kafirs' hearts, cut off their heads and even their fingertips. A kafir can be killed. Quran 4:91. If they do not keep away from you or offer you peace or withdraw their hostilities, then seize them and kill them wherever they are. We give you complete authority over them. Folks, this is not what I call do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or love your neighbor as yourself. So yes, I personally, I don't trust one Muslim in our military because they're commanded to lie to us, to the term called taqiyya, and if they truly are a devout Muslim and follow the Quran and the Sunnah, then I feel threatened because they're commanded to kill me.
You believe they should be forced out?
I absolutely am. I think we should have the Muslim faith is not necessarily a religion. Here's what people don't understand.
Now, you could even argue whether being a Muslim is actually a religion or is it a nationality, way of life, or cult, whatever you want to call it. But certainly, we do protect our religions, but at the same time, this is something that we are going to have to face.
So what you heard is actually what took place last year and continued into this year, an election year. So in Tennessee, we face these types of local politicians. These are elected officials that serve on the state General Assembly, the state Senate, and the state House. Does everybody here know that the three levels of government, right? The federal, state, and your local levels of government. So federal, of course, you have your U.S. senators and your U.S. representatives who are elected by district, and they go to Washington, D.C. to serve. And then you have another layer that serves at your state level. And of course, you all are very organized here in Texas, so you have, mashallah, some involvement even here, I think, on the local level in Houston. But actually, this came to us last year kind of out of the blue, and Tennessee was one of 31 states since last year until today that had an anti-Sharia bill, an anti-Islam bill, an anti-Muslim bill, whatever you want to call it, introduced into the state legislative level. So there was actually very few people, anti-Muslim people, groups around the country. They coordinated an effort, and they went state to state, and they introduced bills on the state level targeting Islam in some way. So in Arizona, they targeted immigration law. In Oklahoma, they targeted family law and marriage and things of that nature, saying that Sharia or Islamic law could not be used when a judge makes a decision about a divorce case, for example, or an adoption case, for example. And then in other states, even up in the Midwest or the North, like Montana and Wyoming, in the middle of nowhere, in Alaska, there were actually bills introduced. But the most severe bill that was introduced last year was in Tennessee. And in these other states, they actually had bills that targeted very specific parts of the constitutional law. But in Tennessee, they actually tried to ban Islam altogether. So one gentleman who was from Arizona introduced a bill into the state level, and he got some sponsors, a local senator and a local House of Representative rep, and he asked them to endorse the bill and present it on the floor. So those people listened to his pitch. They went and convinced a few other people to sign on to the bill, and they actually got it introduced. And I'm not exaggerating. The bill literally said a Muslim can be put in jail or fined put in jail for 15 years or fined thousands of dollars for practicing Islam, or one of the four madhahib, or just for being a Muslim. A mosque can be shut down, and a mosque administration could also be prosecuted for opening the mosque, for letting Islam be practiced and prayers go on inside that mosque. In its original form, this is what that bill said. So obviously, it was a huge wake-up call to our community in Tennessee. So last year, let me take a moment and tell you about what happened. We had some organizations that were focused on different areas. We had some pro-immigrant, immigrant rights organizations, and we had some other nonprofits that were working in different areas. They were not necessarily Muslim organizations, but they had Muslims working for them. And this bill showed up on the radar. And I've grown up in Tennessee. I'm from Memphis. I'm a local Memphian. I get to travel a lot. You know, alhamdulillah, I come to Houston. Houston's one of my favorite communities outside of my home community. And by the way, you guys know what's happening tonight, right? Anybody know? Memphis is playing the Rockets. That's right, here in Houston. And we're going to beat you guys because we were #1 team just a couple weeks ago. No, nothing. That is okay. All right, getting back to the subject. So when we found out about this bill, you guys actually were already ahead of the game compared to other states. So I give Texas credit for that. You had other resources in this state that organized the community and community leaders years ago and stopped things like this from happening years ago. I don't know how many people actually know that. But in Tennessee, we have, mashallah, a good number of masajid for being a smaller state. We have about 40 masajid according to the most recent studies across the state. And me being a local Memphian, I'm in West Tennessee. Tennessee is a very long state. If you've ever seen it on the map, we divide it into 3 regions: west, middle, and east. And you can drive across this whole state. It takes about 8 or 9 hours. I know that's nothing for you Texans. It's 15, 16 hours. You can keep driving across Texas. You'll still be in it. But for Memphis, to talk to the folks in Knoxville, which is on the other side of the state, West Tennessee to East Tennessee, it hardly ever happened. In fact, I'll tell you how disconnected we were. The people in Knoxville used to work with the people in North Carolina and Virginia because they border those states. But they wouldn't work with, we had no connection with them. But all of a sudden, people like this that introduced the bill, you know what they did? They brought us all together. And when they introduced this bill, we had a few people that brought it to our attention. One sister you'll hear from in just a minute, she works for us now, she's sitting behind me. And they reached out to as many people as they knew in different Muslim communities across the state. Middle Tennessee, East Tennessee, West Tennessee. And they say, look guys, there's this bill on the floor. This is what it's going to do. We couldn't believe it. When I first heard about it, I was like, there's no way. There's no way that could even proceed. And then we found out it was real. So we literally loaded up buses of people. And we drove down to Nashville, which is about 200 miles away from Memphis. And we showed up. And they showed up from East Tennessee. Muslims showed up from East Tennessee, from across Middle Tennessee. And we converged on Capitol Hill in Nashville. Nashville is our state capital. And there were hundreds of Muslims standing out there. It was a cold day. It was April, but it was really cold. It was gray, it was dreary, it was raining. There were thunderstorm and tornado warnings that day and the next day. I mean, the Muslims went through a lot to get there, and they stood out there. They walked block to block looking for the right place to enter. We had people as young as 3 and 4 years old, and we had, mashallah, our senior veterans of the community up to 80 years old. Because people were scared. They really thought that they would have to leave Tennessee. People that were founders of the community that came to Memphis in the 60s and 70s, much like you have here in Houston. I'm looking around the room, and I can pretty much guess that the majority of this room, most of you are immigrants or children of immigrants like I am. My parents came here over 30 years ago. They came to Memphis. Many of you probably came here in the 60s, even before that. So these bills really were targeted at people like you, those of you that came here. The folks that were here for generations, like our African American brothers and sisters, they were kind of insulated from some of this stuff. They were actually being recruited by the anti-Muslim folks. They tried to go to them and say, you know, you don't have to go to their side. Stay on our side. Really, that's what was happening. They tried to turn our own brothers and sisters against each other. So they were really targeting the largest immigrant groups. And they tried to ban, as I mentioned, Islam altogether through the text of this legislation. So when we showed up on the Hill, we had lawmakers. One lawmaker remarked that she had never seen so many people show up for any issue, much less this issue. So what you just heard a minute ago on the video, I was sitting right in front of that gentleman. He's unfortunately, one of our state representatives, Rick Womack. I was sitting in the first row when he was making those comments, and I couldn't believe my ears. 2 weeks before that, I couldn't believe that something like this would even be introduced, and then I show up on the Hill, and this is what I hear. And brothers and sisters, what I described to you, I wasn't being dramatic. We went through a lot to get there. And then after we got there, we tried our best. We used whatever connections we had, and we went to offices of senators and representatives, and we tried to get meetings. These bills were going through the committee process. They have to go through like the different types of committees to get approval before they go to the floor to be voted on, to be turned into law. So it was going to the Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee in each state decides if a bill is constitutional and all that type of stuff. So I went to the senator in my district, myself, and about 7 or 8 community leaders. And we had lawyers amongst us, we had founders of the community, we had people involved in other organizations. And we met with him. Young, newly elected, conservative senator. But I'll give him credit, fair guy. And we caught him just before he was going out on the floor to go vote. And we pleaded with him. We said, look, this bill is unconstitutional. And we gave him our list of reasons why it was unconstitutional. And he responded and gave us his reasons why he thought that the new updated bill that he helped reduce down to something more nice, I guess is a generic word I could use, was constitutional. It was nicer than the first bill that I described to you. But even when we kept pushing back and forth our points, he said, look, I got to go vote. But even if I agreed with you right now, you guys are too late. You're just too late. The deal is done. And you just showed up. Where were you for the past few months when we were debating this bill? I was one of the people who took that most strict bill or most extreme bill, and I watered it down for you. And now you're showing up last minute as I walk out the door to tell me that this bill is not constitutional? Sorry, you're too late. So we left there, and we watched them pass that bill through that committee session. And all those hundreds of Muslims, they were crowded in the hallway, inside the session area, outside in the rain, outside in other rooms. They were watching it on monitors. It was like somebody sucked the life out of us. Not only was this bill introduced, not only did we have to hear these type of people talking about it, our elected officials, which no elected official should ever be saying things like this, they actually passed the bill. And as we were leaving that day, driving back in one of the worst storms in Tennessee history, I can't even tell you how bad it was. It was scary. We felt very deflated. We had an older brother in the community, ask us, will I be able to pray anymore? That's how bad it was. And we weren't really sure what to do. But, the next day, we woke up and we decided we can't just sit down and lie down and take it the way it is. We have to do something about this. And alhamdulillah, we tried to organize. We really put in all the efforts we can do it. Obviously, after the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the efforts of many people in our community, alhamdulillah, the bill was actually reduced down to nothing. And the original bill went away, and all the things targeting Muslims went away. But that was a big wake-up call. And we thought about what that senator told us, that you're too late. So the rest of the year, can we put up that slideshow, please? The rest of the year, we started focusing on what we need to do. So a group of young Muslims across the state were trying to organize a community, and we kept meeting with community leaders, and just like this community here and every other community out there in the country, we had many leaders approve of it. They loved the idea, but they said, look, this is not my cup of tea. This is not what I'm good at. And I run the mosque. I run the community. I don't do this. So we said, look, we're losing time here. We got to do something. So we established this organization. It's called the American Center for Outreach. And we're going to tell you about it real quick, about what it does and why we're here talking to you today about it. Can we have the next slide? Sorry, one more slide. That was supposed to be the video. So here you see a quick timeline of what happened last year. So after the bill was introduced and we had another organization alert the community on what happened, Muslims gathered on the Hill and they responded and they opposed this bill. And then after the bill was watered down, actually a bill did pass, but all it said basically, and I'm simplifying it, was that if anybody ever commits an act of terrorism, they will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Well, we didn't need another bill saying that, but obviously all of us, nobody's going to be against that, so we agreed. We said we approve. We support that type of bill. But something bigger happened, and that is, as we were talking about what to do next, we noticed something, and the anti-Muslim groups noticed something. We had a huge vulnerability in the community. Nobody represented our interests on the local level. We always say, oh yeah, Muslims are involved in politics, and we point to a national politician. And in fact, Brother Muhammad, he couldn't be here today. He's one of your fellow Texans. He's involved at a national level. But he's also helping you here, very fortunate, mashallah, that he's helping you on a local level. But we didn't have that in Tennessee. We had a sister that was actually working in another capacity for another organization. So we decided that we needed to do something. Can we put that slide back up? So we established ACO. Can we have the next slide? So why was ACO founded? Well, we had to represent our interests, and we had to find a way to engage the Muslim community and represent the Muslim community on a full-time basis. Next slide. So this past year was pretty busy. What we did after we established it is we hired Sister Remziya Suleyman, who you'll hear from in a minute. She became our policy director. Sister Remziya, we found her working and organizing the community last year. Hundreds of people reaching out to masajid across the state because that's the only way we were connected to people. And she brought everyone to the Hill, helped explain what was going on, and was constantly meeting with lawmakers trying to present our point of view. But because of her role in another organization, she couldn't do it full time. So after we found out about Sister Remziya, we said, you know what, we'd be fools not to hire somebody like this. She's educated, she's talented, she has a passion to work for the Muslim community. She wants to. And we need something like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put this in our lap. This is what we need to do to get going. So we hired Sister Remziya. And then we started different efforts throughout the state and throughout the year. We had one of the first things we did is we capitalized on our strength in the community, which across the state was we had pretty good connections with people of other faiths, organizations of other faiths. And you know what's so good about the interfaith work? Is that when you get very involved in it and you build relationships over the years, not only do people trust you, but these type of people that represent us, and elected officials, when they say crazy things like this, and they go to a church, if you don't know their pastor, or their rabbi, or their imam, or their person of religious background, then your contact probably knows them. And then when you have somebody that you trust and know, like your pastor, come up and tell you, what are you doing? What are you talking about up there? It makes a big difference. So we had people on both sides of the aisle that knew people in the anti-Muslim groups and people who worked in the administration of the state of Tennessee, in the government. And alhamdulillah, that really, really was effective in getting this bill reduced and removed from the state floor. So can we get the slide back up? So we also helped those folks that helped us by bringing them to the Hill, and we did a clergy day on the Hill where we actually took pastors and rabbis and over 150 officials of other faiths, and we trained them. We took them to meet their elected officials. We sat with the governor, we sat with the Speaker of the House, we sat with their senators and their representatives, and we showed them how they should speak to them and how they should ask those people for what they want. And then those people got to meet these community leaders face to face as well, because for them, it's very important to know these people. It's their votes and it's their support that they have on the ground. And then, of course, this year's an election year, so we really worked across the state to get more people registered to vote and encourage people to go vote. And alhamdulillah, across the state, imams and community leaders were behind this effort. They really, really pushed people. We had a coordinated effort across the state, khutbahs and campaigns to get people to get out to vote. And then one of the most unique things we did in the first time in Tennessee Muslim history, we actually established a political candidate scorecard. People running for office in the state of Tennessee were ranked by our organization based on their history of votes and support for or against Muslims. So there were candidates running this year that were against the Muslim community. They were sponsoring those bills that were literally saying, we want to put Muslims in jail for practicing Islam. Can we have the next slide? So here's a quick look. One of the things that I'm proud of as chairman of this organization is that all the folks on this slide not only grew up in this country and in Tennessee, but they're all under the age of 40. Alhamdulillah, at a very young age, I had the opportunity and the blessing to be very involved in the Muslim community. But that involvement, I believe, helped train me for other things. But not all of our young people get that opportunity. So I'm going to get to what I'm talking about in just a second. Can we have the next slide? So one of the first things we had to do to differentiate ourselves from other masajid and schools and other nonprofits was we had to structure ourselves to engage politically. See, 501c3s and houses of worship like masjids and churches and synagogues are geared for worship. They are structured for worship. And when they go and try to engage politically, they have very limited capabilities. In fact, if they do it too much, the IRS can come and say, we're going to take your status away. So 501c4s are actually the structure, a legal structure that allows organizations to lobby and do advocacy type work. And you see that there. Their main purpose, though, is promotion of social welfare, and our purpose is promotion of the Muslim social welfare. Could we have the next slide, please? So there's a quick view of what we do. If you could leave these next couple of slides up, that would be great. I'm sorry, go back one more. So what we do, our main core function is that we lobby, we meet with the elected officials every session. So every session from January to June, and then from July to December, there are political sessions that go on, and we have a full-time lobbyist and full-time policy director that goes to the Hill every single day, meets with those folks, tracks what they're doing, understands if there's something that the Muslim community needs to be alerted about, they're alerted about it. And don't think that after what happened last year, it all stopped. It didn't. Because what happened is that these anti-Muslim groups became a little bit slicker. Not smarter, just slicker. So instead of talking about Muslims directly, what they did is they started focusing on issues that were important to the Muslim community. So when I mentioned that they were really targeting the immigrant community, one of the first issues that they focused on was immigration. Then there is a large refugee population in Middle Tennessee. They went after the refugee community. And then they went after education, school books, and universities, trying to see what was written in school books about Islam, to change it, to misrepresent it. Can we put the slide back up? And then we had to educate our community. Most of our community actually is very uneducated about the political process in America. They have very wrong ideas. They have very skewed ideas. So one of the most challenging tasks we have is really to get out there and correct those misconceptions and to really teach people about the process. And then we have so many resources in the community, from businesses to people in even political involvement and civic and leadership involvement, that we don't really know how to leverage that. We don't know how to organize it. So that's one of the things that we're doing as well across the state. And then with all this interfaith work that we've done across the state, we had to figure out a way to leverage those connections. We have a lot of friendly relations. People, when we were leaving Memphis, because I'm from Memphis, and we were going to Nashville, one of the first groups to call us, even before other mosques got a chance to talk to each other, was a church. And that church had actually had a dialogue with us just a month or two before. And that dialogue helped them understand Islam and Muslims on a much deeper level. And though they may not agree with us theologically, from an aqidah level or any other way, they did feel closer to us in other ways after getting to know us. And they called us and they said, if you want us to go with you to Nashville and stand on the Hill with you and oppose this bill, we are ready and we have a busload of people ready to go. So if anybody does not believe that interfaith work is beneficial, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. It really helped, alhamdulillah. Can we put it back up? And then, of course, we're focusing on those issues right now that are not only important to the Muslim community, but to all faith groups and ethnic groups. And that is religious liberties and religious freedom and issues of civil liberties and civil rights. Can we have the next slide? So, alhamdulillah, in the past 1 year, we've been able to not only raise some money across the state, continue our operations, but we have full-time representation on our state hill. We have been able to make that scorecard that I mentioned. We've been able to distribute and publish publications and represent ourselves on the national stage and various conferences and other organizations that look to us for expert advice on what goes on in Tennessee. And then, of course, voter registration drives and trying to educate the community. Next slide, please. Here's just a quick overview of what we plan to do as we go forward. Now, I want to pause here for just a second and come back to what I mentioned a minute ago about young leadership. And after that, I'll conclude. You're going to hear after me a sister who's a very talented sister who works, as I mentioned, full-time for us and works on the Hill. And this is really her calling. This is her drive. This is what she does every single day when she wakes up. She goes and she meets with elected officials and she makes sure that there's folks working for us, not against us. And there are pieces of legislation and other laws not being created against us. And in fact, we're trying to work proactively and pass laws that represent the Muslim community and other communities in a positive fashion. But we cannot do this, and we could not have done this if we had a community and community leadership that tried to hold us back. And believe me, we still have our challenges, and and in some parts of the state, we are still not doing things perfect. We have a lot of mistakes. We're learning along the way. But that's all part of the process. We have young, talented individuals in every community. You heard Brother Atif come up and talk about UNMAS, and that's something very near and dear to my heart because this is what I've done for many years. Aside from my involvement in ACO, I'm involved in many other community-based organizations, including my local masjid, and I have many stories to tell, and I can relate to a lot of what he said. But we have to let our young people start stepping up in leadership positions. If we're not letting them step up in our masajid, then we should really encourage our young people, our own children, to get out there and go into these types of professions that are not just engineering-based and medicine-based, but we need more lawyers, we need more policy-based folks, we need more politicians. We should tell people to go. I had no background in politics before I got involved with ACO. And I don't think I need to have one in order to have enough common sense to know that if we don't get out there and engage, something like that, Allah forbid, could happen again. Brothers and sisters, this is an established community. You have established communities across the state. Please do not let all the time slip you by and all these efforts pass you by without trying to organize your communities and start working. Nothing has to be perfect. You don't have to agree with everything 100%. But you have to start working and organize things. We have requests from at least 5 other states that want to open ACO chapters. Maybe you'll have one in Texas. We hope to have one in every state in the future, inshallah, all 50 states. But that's not why I'm here today. We really want to inspire and motivate folks to get out there, and as the presentation started, that we educate, empower, and engage. Because unless we do that, we're not going anywhere. Educate, empower, engage, because that really is the way forward. Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum. Promise I'm not texting or tweeting up here. I have my notes on my phone. So Brother Danish did an amazing overview of what we faced in Tennessee. And Tennessee, like many places in the U.S., truly is at a crossroads in terms of the political advocacy for the Muslim community. Tennessee has had its unique challenges. We've had our difficulties. But through it all, we've definitely had our blessings. So I want to begin because throughout the struggles of last year, there's a verse in the Quran that repeated every time we met with individuals. And for me, this quote is truly, these 2 quotes actually really symbolize what we did and how we were able to overcome it. First and foremost, the verse that says, they plot and plan and Allah too plans, but the best of planners is Allah. And there was moments on the Capitol here when we had to sit there and we had to hear those comments and be called criminals and terrorists and think to ourselves, what are we doing here? But reminding ourselves that God is helping us through this. And in a way, we saw this because we as a Muslim community continue to be complacent, inactive, maybe not here in Texas, but in Tennessee, that was the case. In Tennessee, our community never before had organized to the capacity that it had in last year. So the verse for me that says, indeed, Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in themselves. That was our wake-up call. Yes, they used scare tactics. Yes, they threatened to put us in jail for practicing our faith, but at the end of the day, we knew why we were there. Just now to kind of set the political landscape for you all. In a recent study that was released by the Institute for Social and Policy Understanding, it's true that the Muslim community has been really at a social crossroad. But listen to these numbers. 80% of American Muslims are U.S. citizens, including the 70% of those who are immigrants. Our population is relatively young. 60% of our population, let me say this again, 60% is between the ages of 18 and 39. Our voter registration rates as a community is 66%. However, only 51% of young Muslim Americans between the ages of 18 and 39 are registered to vote. Think about that number for a second. We have the youngest age group between 18 and 39, the highest percentage, yet we are the least registered voters. How can we expect our condition to change if we don't change our own condition first? How is that? As a community, we have the numbers, we have the capacity, we have the opportunity, yet we choose not to. In the study as well, they found that 53% of individuals who were involved, 53% were more involved in the political process if they were involved in an Islamic center or mosque. Once again, we have the capacity, we have the structure, we have the organization, yet we are not taking the opportunity to change the political landscape, to change the rhetoric for ourselves. We're continuing to let the anti-Muslim groups define us as Muslims. We are not our own spokespeople. And we realized this in Tennessee. And in 2011, when the bill was passed, was not only our opportunity to stop the most anti-Muslim legislation in the U.S., but it was finally for Tennessee Muslims to stand up and speak for themselves. If I could get the slide, please. Can go on to the next one as well, please. So our mission and our vision are up here. I'm not going to go through this because Danish did a good job of explaining it. But I do want to add that our role at ACO, the American Center for Outreach, is not to be the voice for the Muslim community. My goal is to prepare you to be your voice for yourself, and specific focus on our young, up-and-coming youth leaders. But our goal is to really give you the tools and resources you need to engage in not only the political process, but in your communities overall. Next slide, please. So the issue, this was our issue. The anti-Sharia bill was a movement, was an outcome of numerous things that happened in our state. How many of you have heard the controversy around Park 51, or what they call the World Trade Center Mosque? All right. How many of you have heard of the Murfreesboro Mosque controversy? So the New York mosque debate erupted debate in our state around the small community that was expanding. The community had been there for about 30 years, and now they wanted to expand to a bigger place. And so the community there, a small minority, did not let them do this. Fortunately, several weeks ago, we actually finally had the grand opening of the mosque after the government stepped in and said, you must allow them to have their place of worship. But let's remember, historically, with the Muslim community and what we are still seeing is nothing new. There's historically in U.S. history, there has been a continuous attack on another group that is deemed other or different. Think about it. African Americans, the Japanese, the Chinese. And today, in our time, it is the Muslim community. And we have to be able to look at these past experiences and learn from those and take those strategies to stop what is happening to us. Our greatest allies were not only the African American Muslims in Tennessee, but the African American community who helped us and told us this is exactly what you're going through that we went through. And we as a Muslim community, I hate to say, how many of us go back and trace the civil rights era and educate ourselves on what they faced and what tools and skills and techniques they used to overcome the injustice they faced? Can I get another slide, please? So our strategy was many folds. First and foremost, I was bringing together a very ethnically, sometimes even religiously diverse Muslim community. our mosque, as Brother Danish said, some of them had never interacted with each other for the first time. This was their first time. Never before had they even spoken to leaders from different centers. But the fear of not belonging forced them to come together and create a coalition. We had to move as an outcome of the Murfreesboro Mosque from a reactive to a proactive position. You can't just change the status of yourself and the status quo without doing some legwork from behind the scene. You have to have set the stage for yourself. Proactive strategies included media work, op-eds, having interviews, going to churches, synagogues, going into areas that never seen Muslims, and being the face of the Muslim community. Can I get the next slide, please? And first and foremost, the Muslim community can't continue to be the spokesperson for themselves all the time. Yes, it's important to be our voice, to say what needs to be said, but we need people who know us to speak for us. And that's what we had to do. And most importantly, I think my favorite part of this was the unlikely allies. Having the state Tea Party from East Tennessee write a press release against the anti-Sharia bill. Never in my wildest dream, in all the years I've done political work, and especially work around with the Tea Party, have I seen Tea Party support any of our issues. But the Tea Party stepped it up and were able to get us the 2 no votes we needed to help change the bill. And these 2 no votes were also the only two Republican individuals to vote no on the bill in committee. So please, as you do your work in your communities, you need to think of these unlikely allies, the organizations that you traditionally don't work with, or even the community members who can be your support system. Next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about the challenges. We were going against one of the most funded, well-funded, most well-organized anti-Muslim network in the U.S. We were going against organizations who had already planted the seed in Tennessee, who were feeding off the fear and had the money to back them up. All of the work that we did was voluntary basis. All of the work that we did to bring the community together was through either donations or support of our community. But these networks, you have to keep in mind, yes, they are well-funded, yes, they are well-organized, but at the end of the day, they do not represent most Americans. And in our case, they did not reflect Tennesseans. Next slide, please. So this is just information on our organization. And I'm going to take a few moments to talk a little bit about the work that I do on a day-to-day basis, and then we'll conclude. I have been doing political work in the state of Tennessee for several years now, about 5 to 6 years now. My first time at the state capitol with my hijab, I was called a nun. I had a state senator who looked at me and said, "Are you a nun?" And I had to smile and say, "No, sir," but very close. So this was the mentality that I was dealing with for the first time. In Tennessee history, they were not only meeting Muslims, but they were seeing a young Muslim hijabi tell them that their laws are unconstitutional or how they could amend a bill. They didn't expect this. And I'm not saying this to discredit the brothers. The brothers in our community did a great job. But it was the women in our community that changed the tone. It's a Muslim community. It's a Muslim women who are your walking targets of Islam. You brothers can fit into the crowd and get away with it. But the sisters, especially our hijabi sisters, are the targets. And when elected officials, many who have never interacted with Muslim community members, come across an articulate, educated Muslim sister, they think twice next time they want to bring bills. They think about that sister and they say, and I've been told many times, you do not fit the stereotypical role of a Muslim woman. And we can't believe the men in your community let you do this work. But I say this because the political activism is not just on the shoulders of the brother, sister. I say this because we as women tend to take a back row position in terms of politics and political activism. In Tennessee, my number one volunteers who were the most organized and well-received were the youth. It was the 18 to 25-year-olds who were able to change the discussion, the debate. And I think we need to keep that in mind as we move forward, that the elders in our community have planted the seeds. The quote that was said earlier in the day, one generation plants the tree and another generation gets the shade. SubhanAllah, that is the perfect example of what we're facing in Tennessee. The elders have paved the way. The centers have gone from cultural centers to religious institutions. And now it is time for our community to become political advocates. And I want to give a quick example of why it's important for us to be at the state capitol and at meeting with even local officials, whether it's school board or state or wherever. In all the years that I've done this, I have been the only Muslim face lobbyist in the state of Tennessee. It's been difficult, it's been hard when I have to sit down and hear comments like that every day that were shown to you. But when they saw over 1,000 Muslims at the state capitol in 2 weeks, that changed their perception. And this year, and even during elections, I had elected officials who were running for office and contacted me and said, I need to get into your community. We know you're politically active. We know you're politically there. Help us get into the community. And before I was able to do that, I said, sure, I'll gladly help you, but I need to know where you stand on these issues. Or I went back and I researched their stance and I told them, this is where we disagreed. And we had to make sure that there was promises being made. I don't want any promises any different than the regular community. I want promises that ensure the civil rights and civil liberties of Muslims in Tennessee. And those officials recognize that. I'm happy to say that because of our candidate scorecard, many of the elected officials that we ranked high won their re-election. And many of those that didn't do so well on our card didn't get re-elected. And it's simple. Many of these races in certain places in Tennessee were won between 50 and 100 votes. Mashallah, in Houston, I'm pretty sure you all can have not only state representatives, but you guys can run congressional folks. But think about it. How many Muslims are serving in political office right now? How many Muslim sisters are politically active? Before we can ask the broader community to stop attacking us and pushing us and making us the other in society, we need to examine ourselves and look at what we're doing wrong. What is it as a Muslim community that is preventing our youth from running for office? What is it that parents are doing that are preventing their kids from going to different degrees? What is it that we're not teaching in our mosques? What are we doing wrong? And in order for us to change the mentality and the rhetoric against us, we have to be politically active. And if you don't, and if you refuse not to, then you have no one to blame but yourself. So I'm going to conclude with that. I don't know how much time we have left. All right, that's it. Well, Jazakallah khair for being here, and thank you for the opportunity.